let's kick off the first session. The first one we have is a short video contribution by Giorgio Mulè and the Secretary at the Ministry of Defense. Enjoy it, and in the meantime, the stage is going to be populated. I'd like to welcome the organizers of this important, very important day devoted to what's next for the future, because we can roll the dice, fair enough, but we also have to win. So the challenges ahead that you're going to be discussing today affect all of us, not just businesses and B2B, but through B2B, they will be nervated in the very nature of every one of us in our daily life. One of these topics certainly is cybersecurity. Cybersecurity does not mean and will not mean just a focus on phishing or data theft in terms of the individual's current accounts or privacy data. No, cybersecurity is a notion of digital culture that belongs to a community. On cybersecurity, Italy is on the same foot of other countries because it's becoming independent in terms of the security scope, and then it's also interconnected, as should be the case, not only in terms of private and public structures, but also with the supranational organizations. Cybersecurity is governed by decree law approved last summer by the Parliament and wanted by the government that established the Agenzia Nazionale per la Cybersicurezza, and the Ministry of Defense, where I am under secretary, is one of the main players of the agency. The agency is still in its infancy. It started to work. The top has the director and deputy director general. It's been filled with staff, at least at the beginning, with about 100 members. But in 5 years, this will shoot up to 800, 900 members selected from amongst the best and outstanding members in this field. And the purpose of the agency is to share the various knowledge and experiences, not just in terms of intelligence, but also in terms of security and in terms of the cyber threat, and most especially cyber resilience that engages all of the primary players. On the front of the country's system, in the National Plan for Recovery and Resilience, 220 million have been allocated. Not that much as compared to the total amount, but that's not true. It's not true because, first and foremost, it's something real, immediate, that is made available to the resilience connected to cybersecurity. But this goes hand in hand with the huge investments made for the digital transition, which is a new awareness that also includes cybersecurity. So right now, our task is to structure it best. On the one hand, the National Agency for Cybersecurity, and on the other hand, in parallel, to initiate a literacy, digital literacy, involving all of the environment around the businesses and public administration. On the latter, we have a duty to equip it as much as possible of a shield so that our strategic infrastructures, and I'm not just talking about the military ones, which, thanks God, are very well defended, but I'm referring to aqueducts and electricity plants. I mean, all that makes a democratic state a state that can rely upon TLC infrastructures. So right now we have to make them secure and have them talk the same language in terms of prevention and, if need be, of reaction, response to the cyber threat. Okay, that was it for Giorgio Mulè, the Secretary at the Ministry of Defense. On the website of Mix, you'll find the full speech. Mulè, for example, talked about training and education and the investments that are being made to train people, educate the people who will deal with cybersecurity. And education and training is not just about cybersecurity, but it covers the whole digital sector. I guess that you all know how difficult it is to find competencies on the market. Besides the guests whom you'll see here, and then I'm going to introduce, we also have Nunzia Ciardi, Deputy Director of the National Agency for Cybersecurity, and Luca Carabetta, MP 5 stars of the member of the Commission for Productive Activities. They're linked with us. Good morning, welcome. So here with us we have Alessandro Talotta, whom we met a moment ago, Chair of Mix, Federico Protto, CEO of Retelit. Welcome. Thank you. Good day. Daniele Leodori, Deputy Chair of the Lazio region. Massimo Palermo, Country Manager Italy and Malta of Fortinet, talking about cybersecurity. That's to the point. So since Giorgio Mulè hinted at the newborn agency for cybersecurity. Over to you, Nunzia Ciardi. Welcome. Good day. Good morning to all of you. Please give us an update. Where are we? We know that the agency is being born. It's going to take some months, quite obviously, for it to become fully operational. But where are we? Let's say that we are marching on full speed ahead. We are working hard for this. I must avow that we are not standing still. We are carrying out some activities. We are moving on with the organization, and in parallel, we are carrying out some activities that we've already started to carry out. Now there are 90 people. But like the Secretary Mulè said, this will go up to 300 in 2023, and in a matter of some years, by 2027, this shoot up to 900 people. So, quite an important reality that organizes the field of cybersecurity, where we were lagging behind compared to some other European countries where these agencies were established some years ago, like in Germany and France. They had organized this. They've had this agency for some years. Now, thanks to the sensitivity of the government on this, in August, the Cybersecurity Agency was established at a time when the digital security is going through a time of huge risk and a huge vulnerability as well, for a number of reasons. The technological advance in our companies has moved on so fast. They're entirely digital. We are becoming digital even without realizing. So, like I said, this acceleration that has seen in a matter of just a handful of years an extreme digitalization in our daily life. Well, on top of this, there's been the pandemic, the black swan, that is a very strong accelerator that has broadened and significantly the digital attack surface, because we've all tried to do online what we could not do in person because of the pandemic. That was a tragedy. We've seen appalling data, attacks on critical infrastructures recorded by the postal police, and I was head of it, so I have, fresh information on that. So, as I was saying, the attacks on critical infrastructures from 2019 to 2020 increased by over 240%. And I'm talking about severe attacks on critical infrastructures, and there's also been, more fight on that. And the same attacks in the first 6 months of 2021 already account for as much as 74% for the whole year 2020. So, well, this is quite a concern, this progression. In this case, the targets are the most dedicated structures of our country, those that deliver essential services. But I must say that the increase in offences relates to both individuals and businesses and critical infrastructures. Just think of the attack on the Lazio region. This is one of the examples, a typical example that represents the severity of these attacks on critical infrastructures like the healthcare. You know, the vaccine campaign was stuck at a time when the world is extremely sensitive. Okay, now, if you give me a couple of short questions, I can ask you 2 more questions while we're here together. First, where do you find all of these people, considering that cybersecurity companies don't find cybersecurity professionals? That's one of the topics to be dealt with by the agency. We don't have top-notch professionals in this field. Those who were in Italy went abroad in most cases, because the career path was paid better abroad. So one of the tasks of the agency is to bring back to Italy these brains who left Italy and kick off a virtuous circle with universities and schools to raise the awareness of the importance of this fundamental workforce.
The next question is around one of the key worries I've heard from operators in companies. So the main worry is around the fees, actually, and they're hopeful that their job will be facilitated and there won't be any more critical costs or fees to pay. What is your answer on this? Well, of course, our agency has many different goals. Broadly speaking, is to provide digital resilience nationwide. But also, when we say resilience, that is also including and considering a single authority when it comes to cybersecurity. So when we started to discipline and to have new regulations around NIST, there were some 46 authorities around, whereas now we're the single reference contact when it comes to cybersecurity. So this need for streamlining or fine-tuning, if you will, well, that is, of course, something that should now fulfill the company's expectations. Thank you, Nunzia. Ciardi, please stay with us if you can for the rest of the morning. You mentioned Regione Lazio, Region Lazio. Now, Leodori, Vice President of Lazio Region. Now, Mr. Leodori, what is your key learning after complicated months? Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to such an interesting debate. I think that the very first concept that we should emphasize is that when we speak through cybersecurity, when we organize our systems and so on, the key question is not whether we will be attacked, but how are we going to be attacked. It's just like virologists saying that sooner or later this will take place. Exactly, that is the thing. So it's about the how, and of course that emphasizes a weakness in the system. I have to say that we've been organized, fairly nicely organized, ever since 19, and we have tried to prevent cyber attacks first and foremost. And also, we wanted to be able to handle the emergency in the event the attack would take place, which is what happened in 2021, this past summer. So we have tried, let's say, to get ourselves organized in the region so that we could be taken care of. Now, the key objective is to keep on investing in the system. The attack that we received in August 2021 was way more severe than what is being reported by the press. And unless we had been organized decently, and that had been the case for the past 3 years, for the prior 3 years, perhaps we would have reported far greater damage with respect to what we actually did. So we were indeed able to tackle the emergency, and we were able to preserve the data. So I think that the recovery plan will have to focus way more on cybersecurity with respect to what it has promised to do to date. We are now planning to invest some 600 million euro on cybersecurity, and I think that amount is not sufficient, although we should add additional resources that institutions will autonomously invest. For instance, we want to invest an additional 80 million over the next 3 years on cybersecurity. But as Professor earlier on said, the whole of Europe will have to consider what is the geopolitical role that Europe will play in the upcoming years, in the years to come. Because I have to say that more or less all European countries to date have started to invest. Perhaps some countries have lagged behind, well, and Italy is an example. But I have to say that, broadly speaking, the whole of Europe will really have to be fully focused on this kind of investment, on cybersecurity. I'm not saying, I don't want to call this the new war, a new battleground, but it is important for us to do so if we really want to be safe. Massimo Palermo from Fortinet. I'd love to gather your opinion. Now, we started with cybersecurity. We'll broaden this up to infrastructure and the network more in general. Now, I understand that we're still pretty weak, but we're not there by ourselves, for sure. So in your view, what is necessary? What is essential for us to do on top of what we're doing already? And now we are capturing some key messages already this morning. And the main conclusion is that Europe cannot do it by itself. We shall collaborate all together. And perhaps there should be also collaboration between public and private. So some forum cooperation. How about your opinion? Well, thanks so much for inviting me today. If we look at what is happening right now, actually there's one significant thing that we can start from. Of course, those of us engaged on cybersecurity shall do way more. We are amongst worldwide leaders when it comes to cybersecurity. We do design solutions, complete, integrated, automated, fully scalable, capable to fully respond to public administration as well as small and medium-sized companies' needs. So there can't be any digital innovation in absence of cybersecurity. So, of course, all the players attending here today, we're all coping with some strategic aspects. So we need to make sure that our networks are secure. So what can we do? Well, for sure, we have to change the paradigm. We have to go for a paradigm shift, and we cannot really roll the dice. So that is not what we're asked to do. We need to be fully focused on that at 360 degree. We must have the right digital infrastructures in place to implement cybersecurity tools. So what is it that industry companies can do? Well, the Undersecretary Mulè said that we should build ourselves a kind of a shell, a kind of a armor. I think we should really develop resilience and flexibility, which are useful for us to strive in the current scenario, because the attack will take place. Cyber attack will happen soon, sooner or later. Also, we should consider what are the critical infrastructure that we're still not considering, for instance, oil and gas, considering centralization of data, which is something that we haven't done yet, which is what the cloud program is including. And the third aspect that we may work on, we may actually increase the level of awareness as well as preparation. As we said, we shall go for paradigm shift, and we can do so just by adding our expertise on top of what is already around. And we are ready to do so. We want the labor force to be more aware. We want to train and shape the new professionals so that they're able to cope with the threats. And we want to be able to attract the best talents who can help us work on cybersecurity. Federico Protto from Retelit, CEO. You are one of the key players in Italian infrastructure. Now, if we look at the evolution of the network, I'd love to gather your opinion on cybersecurity first. So if we actually take a look at infrastructure more in specific, what are the key aspects that we should focus on, and those perhaps that haven't been mentioned yet, or if you want to make comment on what has been said already? Well, the one thing that hasn't been mentioned yet is the security on submarine cables. As when we tackle cloud and worldwide infrastructure, well, we could say that 98% of worldwide traffic actually is happening in submarine cables. Now, those are critical infrastructures that we shall always mention when tackling cybersecurity from a service standpoint, but also from a geopolitical standpoint. If we take Italy, for instance, country like Italy, where actually 20 cables are actually landing Puglia, Sicily, Calabria soon, and then further up in the north, some are actually landing in Liguria region. Well, of course, it is important to mention that these submarine cables are a critical infrastructure for us as well. Well, the Undersecretary said that these are not yet considered critical infrastructures, and he said that it's not as critical as aqueducts. Well, actually, I believe they are as critical, because if we consider the threat and the attack, what if the attack is happening through submarine cables? Because this is what it might happen. And this is a crucial part of the supply chain, because the component that is actually landing, is about to land, let's say shallow water, perhaps is the cable ending station. And actually, there's one episode back in 2018 where a British journalist was actually able to kind of simulate a potential attack in the cable ending station to show how little these infrastructures are patrolled. And so what I'm saying is that perhaps if that attack actually is happening in that portion of shallow water in the ending station, well, this might happen. And because the 98% of worldwide traffic goes through submarine cables, then how about we do consider those countries where, of course, many of these cables are landing. So this is an important piece of information that I love to emphasize, especially for a country like Italy. And perhaps we even forgot what Snowden told us over the years, but actually one of the crucial aspect in his speech was around the landing station. Indeed, and there are even systems that can even capture some additional information from submarine cables. I thought that that would be impossible through copper, because of course, there is very little, let's say, shield. It can't be shielded well enough. But actually, let me say that even on submarine cables, there are some possibilities to capture data. Well, on top of landing stations, of course. Luca Carabetta will be with you in a moment. But meanwhile, I'd love to ask Talotta, what is and what could the role be for such an important internet exchange in Italy, considering the context we mentioned? Well, of course, I have to mention resilience as well as reliability. So we have to be able to rely on areas where platforms can serve as backup, but also can support routing effectively. Well, I have to say that makes our internet exchange as a single feature that actually connects to neutral players. So this is a kind of a one-of-a-kind feature that really makes us unique in the arena and makes the networks absolutely secure. So if we're neutral, it means that we have more fiber optic providers where there are many different ways to reach out to data centers, so we can tackle security attacks better. So if we go back to the example that was mentioned by Protto, so a submarine cable, of course, will be on CLS as well, but we'll also have to find a different termination point. But that very submarine cable also sits on another infrastructure. See, if we take this, all of this entangling of infrastructures, it makes it more complicated for a single attack to be successful to a single infrastructure. Well, now, it goes without saying that if there's a single point, there's no diversification, and that attack may take place on that single point, well, of course, then now the infrastructure becomes critical. I agree on that. I like it when people say critical, strategic. Well, actually, the one thing I'm saying is that data should not be saved and should not have a single place for custody. We should diversify. For diversification to take place, we should invest. If I may have some water meanwhile. So we used to have this single infrastructure that would connect north to south. That is, of course, a big issue, because if there's a problem, any kind of problem, then the whole thing gets stuck, and there's disconnection. And there was a single way to go over to Frankfurt, and that was not a secure way of working. So you don't want to rely to a single point, to a single infrastructure. So the key question is, how many infrastructures I have available and how do I manage them? What do we want to do in mix? We want as many fiber optic providers to be there. We want diversification to be there. And we want physical infrastructures to be at least duplicate. When Amazon make investment, well, the first thing they ask is, on how many places, how many areas can I install my, let's say, my systems? Because if one has a problem, then I can, let's say, have a different solution. Luca Carabetta, hello, welcome. Well, that was very interesting so far. So I try to be as accurate in my answer now. Luca Carabetta, I am sure you've heard from him already, especially when speaking through cybersecurity, but not only. He has often been engaged with the digitization of the country as well as evolution of the networks. Now, Carabetta, you are part of those deputies, sadly not many, who are interested into the digital environment. We wish we had more. We had more people, and we had more people understanding what the issue is. Unfortunately, you're very few. Again, my question is, what are the key topics that you're focusing on? What is the ongoing debate at the Parliament level? Well, thank you, first of all, and hello to everyone. Yes, we're not many, that's true. And those of us who are there has, let's say, gained some professional experience in this environment, which is clearly very useful. Because if you sit in a parliament, then, of course, you want to deliver your personal experience and then implement, building upon that. Now, today, there's a huge focus on the recovery plan, because, of course, that will be the key driver for investment between now and the next 5 years. And actually, we should perhaps look even beyond that 5 years, actually. But when it comes to the recovery plan, more specifically, I believe there are two different goals which we keep in mind. By 2026, we shall have 75% of the PA migrated on cloud, 61 databases, and we shall also have a 1 gigabyte coverage being delivered throughout, and we're actually lagging behind on that. If we take a look at this scenario in 5 years down the line, I think we should really consider all the risk factors as well as opportunities in between. And of course, cybersecurity is crucial, as when you're migrating such an incredible amount of data on cloud infrastructures, well, of course, cybersecurity is a key topic. We're ongoing we have ongoing debate and work on that, but of course, still investments have to be defined. So, when it comes to the infrastructure, the one thing that I'd love to add is that Gaia X has been mentioned for a year now, and perhaps we should ask ourselves what stage are we at, and whether we are incorporating this in Italy and to what extent.
And they were the ones who started this project. We talked a lot about public administration, but we should also talk about the private sector. We will migrate a lot of the PA to the cloud, and the businesses will have to do the same. As of today, the main incentives are in the package called Transition 4.0. Recently, we made a proposal to increase slightly the incentives for the cloud systems, because that's the future. It's an element of competitiveness and has benefits for a number of areas. So the private sector should do so, together with the investments in cybersecurity that go hand in hand with that. So if I may leave it here, talking about Europe. Besides the plan in Europe, we have the digital compass with these four main streams of intervention: competencies, governance, infrastructures, and business. Aside from the PNRR, we need a broader vision. I'm seeing a lot of coordination by the government with the interministerial committee. There is a synergy between the Ministry of Innovation and that of Economic Development. This government was established with the idea of, holding on during this crisis. Maybe it's not as broad as the entrepreneurs would have liked it to be for cybersecurity and innovation. So the government should have a broader scope so as to give these horizons to the operators and involve them. And by the way, I believe that this type of digital transition cannot be tackled unless with a public-private partnership, PPP, and also involving the private capital, making available public capital, making investments for the industrial policy of the country. We also have Adolfo Urso, chair of COPASIR, if I'm not wrong, and if the indication I got from the engineers is still valid. Okay. Good morning and welcome. Quite obviously, you cannot tell us all. Some things you just cannot tell us, but what are the main concerns that you have when it comes to discussing at COPASIR? First of all, and it's not by chance, during this legislature, when I was vice president and the president was my friend and current Minister of Defense, Lorenzo Gugarini, the first report by COPASIR was on the system of cybersecurity, or better, cybernetic protection, 5G, and telco infrastructure. This was an official report to the Parliament made at the end of over 1 year of investigation under secret, but the report is public. And based upon that, the government also extended the golden power to the telco sector. So we've been working on this since the beginning of the legislature, but also before the COPASIR during the previous legislature, when the government should have implemented but didn't an instrument for cybernetic security. I remember that in other European countries, France and Germany first, a cybersecurity agency was established over a decade ago. We did that after 2 failed attempts with the Renzi government, and the next following one under the Conte government. And that was also an element of political and institutional discussion. And COPASIR during the Draghi government, some hours after my election as president, so in the month of June. And on that occasion, COPASIR stepped in to have a body to give guidance. So the agency, the National Agency for Cybersecurity, at last was established. And in these hours, the committee is examining the 3rd schematics of regulation. It's an opinion we've already approved 2, one for the personnel and the other one for the organization. And we are working on the one relating to the accounts. And then there will be the 4th one on tenders and procurement. This is just to tell you that the topic certainly concerns national security, and it is being discussed by COPASIR that is working hard, because we believe that the agency should be fully completed as quickly as possible. So a moment ago, you mentioned the public administration, and I'm referring once more to Minister Colau, who said that 95% of the PA infrastructure is not yet secure. But the agency is just one aspect. The other aspect, as you said, is the national cloud. We heard twice the Minister of Innovation call out, and it's not by chance. This is because we believe that this is important, and the national pole has been set up in time to make secure the Italian system with the cloud, the national cloud. Well, the level of confidentiality and security of data to be protected is very important. And suffice it to take a look at the public agenda of the works for this week. Well, tomorrow we have an audition of the Sparkle president. It is a fundamental company for national security. And the day after tomorrow, we will hear Minister Giorgetti, the Minister of Economic Development, because, well, we are certainly aware of the fact that it is necessary for the system to be made secure, because it is fundamental for Italy to use at best the resources of the PNRR, which is devoted to a transition that is not just economic, but also system-wide, connected to the life of businesses and citizens. And this transition has to do with the digital transition and the ecological transition, and both transitions can be made securely if the system will be able to identify the instruments to have resilience and to become a system. This digital and ecological transition, I mean, we're aware of it, and we also know that the industrial system stays competitive, because if the digital transition and the ecological transition entail that we move on fast to equip our system, but in doing so, we use like raw materials in the hands of China, and most of the currently used technology comes from Asia, but this also holds true for the digital transition. We are talking about the importance of e-batteries. We need a facility to do that, because otherwise the automotive system in Italy would be at risk in the ecological transition of the automotive system. And at the same time, we also have to have chip makers and semiconductors makers in Italy, because otherwise, if we have to have them from abroad, from our continents, as we've done in these months, during which some value chains have been disrupted for the lack of chips and semiconductors, I believe that it is important for the entire system to be aware of the fact that the digital transition and the ecological transition are not, something painless. Rather, it is extremely important and can only be done if we make the system secure. Also, these days we're talking about TIM, saying that it is significant in our country. Well, if 25 years ago, instead of making that type of privatization that impoverished the assets of the country, and telecom back then, I believe, was one of the top 5 worldwide TLC companies, and now it's one operating in Italy, and the others, the operators, are owned by foreign companies. I think that this is a weakness. Anyway, at the same time, if another avenue had been taken, maybe we would have an important, significant company like Enel and Eni with energy, and we could have had the same in the field of telcos. I don't know what's going to happen. We will just give guidance on the national security, but I'm aware that It's all about a system. Before becoming president of Copasir, I filed some documents to the parliament as an MP on the so-called single network and broadband, as well as maritime cables. And I said that, according to me, it was important to have a state acting as a strategist. How should it act, though? Through CDP? Or should it intervene through a regulatory system or with moral suasion? I mean, the state as a strategy establishes a strategy, and Italy should be at the center of fundamental geopolitical interests and geoeconomic significant interests. And to be at the center, we have to have a strategy that puts together some scattered elements, like, for example, the European cable. I mean, it's Italian, though owned by foreign funds. It is the first important European dorsal and home spark that makes maritime cables where worldwide information passes through. And that information should pass through Italy from the hubs of Palermo, Bari, and Genoa, because this makes us central. And with respect to this nervous system of worldwide maritime cables, they will interconnect continents. So the Atlantic area with the Western democracies and the other emerging continents. So Asia, which is the most important one for the future, and Africa. And all of this can only work if we accomplish our broadband network. And I leave it there. So we have to be part of a system. But all of this has to do with national security, for sure, because it has to do with the competitiveness of the system. Thank you for having me, but I'm so passionate as a president of Copasir and as an Italian looking at the future of our country. Thank you so much, including for reminding us, because this had to be said, that by now many companies are in foreign hands. We call them strategic, but they're no longer strategic. And it would be interesting, for example, but here some know, to know what the market share is of Sparkle, because otherwise it's like Alitalia. We call it strategic, but we find out that 80% of the traffic is in the hands of Ryanair, and we know. But Urso, thank you for reminding us of this topic. So we're at the end, so says the display, but one more round of questions. Protto, talking about telecommunications and talking about infrastructures and development, what's your take on the work done until now, and most especially what's in store for the upcoming years? Like Carabetta hinted at the plan that has a hefty budget of Italia Giga. Well, the plan overall for direct interventions on infrastructures, it's about 6.7 billion, of which 3.8 for the Italian Giga plan. So these resources are, hefty resources. And amongst other things, the Minister for Digital Transition and Mise are running ahead and very fast as to that, because these tenders will have to be awarded, save for extensions, or otherwise we won't have the funds, by June 2022. So, for sure, this intervention is very, very important, and we, just like all of the sector operators, view positively. And in the interest of time, just one more remark on the scope of this tender. Because in compliance with the community directions, Italia Giga is a name that is a case in point, because the networks to be implemented will have to ensure 1 giga in download FTTH networks, so residential and consumer, so 1 giga for download and 200 mega for uploads. So formidable velocity. 1 giga is quite a lot for sure. Okay, thank you. One word from Palermo, and then I'd like to close with Leodori. Talking about collaboration and cooperation, we've talked a lot about this topic, but what type of collaboration can there be, from your viewpoint, between you and the telco players? I would say it is fundamental to have it first thing first. I mean, sharing information on threats and sharing experiences and maybe coming up with integrated solutions is fundamental. I was talking about security. I think we have a lot in common. 3, in a nutshell. We have a threat in common. I mean, businesses and citizens alike. We have to raise the awareness of businesses and help the digital transformation of the country, managing 2 very important areas, i.e. the network and security. And so this is a huge responsibility. Suffice it to take a look at all of the goals of the PNRR and the 5 goals of Italy 2026 to understand that there's a lot we can do. Our first duty is to spread this culture of security by design, and the contribution that we can give, like I said, is not just solutions. We have specific solutions, high-performance solutions with a specific integrated platform for the telco operators, but most especially expertise and competencies. In Italy, over 100 people are available to build partnerships with you, with institutions, because I say it again, in order to boost our ability to prevent problems and to be effective with our responses, since we also talk about ransomware as a service. We also talk about an engineered structure, so the attackers have created a business model. So we have to be a network, a team with institutions and the industry and the public at large. And that's fundamental to take up this challenge and win and enable the digital business of the future and build together the next generation networks and protect them.
So ransomware as a service is something worrisome but fascinating at the same time, because it shows us how the world is growing and evolving. Leodori, now when it comes to skills and competencies, which is something we mentioned times again, so is there a problem in terms of skills, internal skills, and how big that is? Perhaps we don't have a high budget and we speak to external companies and we don't have enough budget available. Let me just mention one example here. When I heard that Aria from Region Lombardy was not able to develop a platform for vaccines to be booked, and actually Region Lombardy had to speak to Poste Italiane, Italian Post, to develop a platform, I was speechless. Perhaps they could have spoken to any IT students. So how big is the problem? Well, when it comes to investment, well, that can be a key issue. That can be really, really big issue. Well, it has been said times and times again this morning. Well, I think what happened in recent past actually has showed us and it made us increasingly available that these incidents can actually have to do with any public institution. So investments have to be greater. But for that to be the case, we must raise awareness. And so raising awareness, training and upskilling, this is becoming all crucial. And in that specific case you mentioned, there was a public institution issue, but also there's something else that we should invest on how to handle data and how to tackle emergencies. So there are, let's say, 3-4 aspects or 3-4 hot topics that we as public administration, we should really change our pace with and invest heavily more, because actually investments will make a difference when it comes to data security. Most specifically, when you're tackling healthcare, well, in this specific example you mentioned, there was a booking vaccines, but there can be other examples where you have to be you want to be very transparent in data security. So actually, the example you mentioned will kind of be a big lesson also for other administrations. So a big round of applause, actually. Now, thank you. Thank you so much, Nunzia Ciardi, from a cybersecurity agency, Urso, from Copasir, Carabetta, Deputy, 5-Star Movement Production, Activities Production. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. We truly appreciate your attendance.